Hi, how you doing?
Welcome to Tech Talks. Today we'll be talking about how to 3D, I guess.
How to 3D? How do you 3D?
Yes. Very complicated,
Very
but I
complicated.
3D.
Okay, so we'll have a conversation then about preparing 3D files with slicing software. Yeah,
Mhm.
and covering just the ins and outs of the software that we use at the Tomball Innovation Lab. All right. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the software first of all. So, uh, I assume one of the things that we want to do is show people where they can get the software that we use. So I here have our web browser up, and for our largest 3D printer, Lulzbot Workhorse, we use a form of Cura that is specific with Lulzbot, and you can find that by going to their Lulzbot website, so lulzbot.com, and I just did a Google search for Lulzbot Cura, and once you're there, you'll find a whole bunch of download links. So right here, this download button will take you to the bottom of the page where you can also find patch notes, specific notes for different devices, different machines, different updates. Um, but for standard use at home, you could use the standard PLA update for the Tagus Workhorse, but you'll also need this version for Windows if you're on Windows, or if you're using some offshoot of Linux, Debian, Fedora, Ubuntu, they have a variety there, or if you're on Mac. So there are downloads for the source software there that you can use, their version of Cura, and then there's updates for specific machines.
So I see there's different like standard, high speed, high detail. What I guess the difference is in the name
So
or
those are like profiles. So whenever we go into the software, we'll see the profiles themselves, and these are those limited profiles. Essentially, they sort of set things for you. Um,
okay.
but yeah, each one's going to give you, high detail is basically the crazy detailed ones that you want. High speed is going to be your quick, prototyping ones, and then standards a sort of middle ground that you want to print with to get a decent 3D print. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll show those here. But yeah, in order to obtain the software, it's a simple download. Click the link, and then you will download the installer. So it's a simple wizard. Take the stable. You don't need the experimental. We'll say take the stable. Um, and whenever you do that, you'll be prompted to download and install. And it's just a wizard from there. So that's how we can get the software. Now, once it's installed, you'll probably have it somewhere on your machine. For me, I'm going to find it here. So it's in my start menu.
So what's the difference between the experimental and the stable?
Uh, Different feature builds. So
Okay.
yeah, they make tweaks and stuff. Basically, it's just something that hasn't gone through QA, I think. Um, I know Kamiko, who is she's the head of like the maker programs and stuff with admin. She runs the office down there, and she's trained us on use of the machines and helps provide programming assistance and all this stuff. She's a really great resource on a lot of this, and she specifically stated, hey, run with the stable. So we're going to follow that
Hmm.
rule set by her. Now, if you want to on your own, feel free. If you're a little bit more experienced with modifying and working with the slicing software, feel free to work with the experimental, especially if it's something that Lulzbot themselves recommend. So in some cases, something that you are trying to do may require a little bit of tweaking. And if you've talked to the Lulzbot staff at all, you can usually contact them for support help or questions about printing. They'll try and help you resolve that sort of stuff. But if you just want to ask about the software, because it is their offshoot, they've designed it, that version of Cura for their machines. They can usually help you determine if you should be using the stable or the experimental. But I would always
So
consider
they have staff readily available for you to ask whether or not you should do
they
one or the other?
they at least have a support staff. I don't know if they're readily available. The chats that I've been in, and this is because of the shift. You may have to wait a while.
Okay.
But the Cura download itself is there. Plus, there's forums and stuff that you can dive into. So you can always ask on their forums as well. And there's a lot of users there that can help you with that. In fact, anytime I run into either an issue with a print or if I'm just trying to diagnose something or whatever, I usually forum dive, so I'll go to Lulzbot's website, I'll go to their forums, and I'll just type in my search queries, and it's like sifting through dirt sometimes to find that diamond in the rough there. But every so often, I'll
Yeah.
find a really good gem of information that I can take and use. But yeah,
How successful would you say the forums are
it
for like
really depends on the topic. If a lot of people are having the same issue, you're going to find that an answer is readily available. That's just how it is. The more people that reproduce the problem, the more
yeah.
that can be worked on. If you're the first one to find it, you're going to be
Good
the one,
luck.
yeah, the one working to get that fixed. And usually there's someone from support or something will usually chime in on the forum post itself. They may ask you to create a ticket. I don't, there's a variety of things, but a lot of it's user um, outsourced. Like other users will try and recreate the problem, work with you on it. At least with all the forum posts that I've dived into. So it really depends on what you're experiencing. Have you had any experience with having to troubleshoot your machine at home?
Yes, quite a bit. So I don't have a Luzbot. I have a what's it called? An Ender 3D or an Ender 3.
Hmm.
It's like one of the cheapest ones you can get on the market. So
It still
I
works
think,
well. They're really good
yeah,
machines.
it does. It really does. I've had to replace the bed on it. Well, it was semi-optional, semi-not. The bed that comes with the 3D or with the Ender 3 is like a plastic type of bed
Hmm.
almost. So it bends and warps easily, so I replaced it with a glass bed.
It's a good
Uh,
upgrade. Definitely worth.
yeah, because the main issue I was having when I first got it was like certain prints weren't sticking.
Hmm.
So it would get halfway through the print and I would leave and go do something, and when I came back, it would just be like this glop of a mess on the bed, and I'm like, what happened? But my current issue is with the nozzle. I switched out the nozzle from basically a bigger one to a smaller one, and that's the one I'm currently troubleshooting. So it's been very frustrating.
Understandable. Yeah, and that's one of the things with 3D printing in general. It's a lot of tweaking and finding out things as you go, which is why diving into those forums can sometimes be helpful because someone may have done a modification similar to you, or they may have insight into it. And, reaching out to other people to find those answers is always something that uh, people should be doing anyway. Like it's a self-taught learning sort of thing, or searching for information on your own. That desire to learn, to find out something. Don't just you can obviously find YouTube videos and stuff like that too, but uh, you know, put the drive in there to try and go find the information in a variety of ways, because maybe you know your favorite YouTuber hasn't talked about it, but someone on the forum has, or there's a really good article about it. There's a variety of ways that you can find the information. And it's just searching for that, trying to find out where it's at. But
Yeah. And a lot of the 3D prints, especially if they're not some of the nicer models, I think they're pretty much like the support system is all fan based, if I'm correct.
yeah,
Because like for the Ender 3, that's all support based for fans. Like if you're having trouble, like your only support is the forums. So
it's understood. Yeah, but I personally don't have a 3D printer at my house. Um, I've me and some friends bought a 3D printer together, and it was something similar to your Ender 3. It was actually the second printer that we have at the Innovation Lab. It's the Monoprice Maker Select version 2.
oh,
So we have one of those that we all share, and it's at a friend's house. So I don't have one to show you, but it'd be a very similar style to yours. Simple frame and spool rack at the top, and then a bed.
so how does that work? Is it kind of like joint custody, like you get it on this weekend and I get it the next, or
We basically said, "Who's got space? Here you go. Cool, you handle that. And if I need to print something, I'll let you know, and I'll come over and start it." And that's all there is to it for us. And then, of course, material or something we'll purchase. Um, it's nothing crazy for us to do, and we can all utilize the spools and stuff like that. But it's yeah, it's not like I'm getting it Saturday and it's gonna be here for this week. Nothing like that.
I think that's actually a really smart idea, especially if you have a close group of friends, like splitting the price and the cost for everything.
Yeah, so let's take a look at Cura here. So this is the software that we will be using here at the branch. Right now, we are all in our own homes, as you can see. COVID-19 has got everyone staying at home, so we're creating something here to help people understand a little bit more about the software in general. So let's take a look here at some of the simple stuff. So just looking at the user interface on the screen here, and Lexi, can you see it? Okay.
Yeah, I can see
Okay.
it just well.
So we're using a lot of different softwares here to try and make this happen. Teams for chat, OBS for recording. It's all sorts of fun. But we have our standard sort of like Windows interface here. So file, edit, view, settings, extensions, plugins, preferences. We'll not go too crazy into this because a lot of this stuff is handled elsewhere as well. Like, I can go to file and say open, but I can also just click this icon right here. But this is the interface here. You can navigate through it using your mouse. So right click and drag will rotate the screen here. A mouse zoom will increase or decrease. And then if you actually have an object on here, you can try and maneuver it around a little bit. But first, let's talk about getting an object in there. So the first thing that you want to do is prepare your STL file or your OBJ file. You want to prepare your file itself. You want to have that 3D model. Is there a model that you have, Alexi, that you want me to try and get, or should I just open up something I got standard here?
Uh, I guess just go ahead and try and open up something standard.
Okay.
Uh, I wasn't prepared for that.
So on my device here, I have this.
Oh, actually, you know what?
Hmm.
Why don't we look up a gear mechanism so people can see where they can get the files?
Okay, so we want to take a look at a gear specifically.
Yeah, like I
Well,
know there's a bunch on Thingiverse that like it's a mechanical
so
gear that you can replace with.
you're recommending Thingiverse then for okay. So
Yes.
this is owned by MakerBot, which is a manufacturer of 3D printers. And this is their their online database essentially. So they curate it a little bit. But we can utilize the stuff in here. There's other ones out there. There's Yagi. There's a. Do you know of any others that you use specifically?
In all honesty, I usually use Thingiverse or I'm blanking on the name now. It's basically Desktop Hero. Since a lot of the things that I print tend to involve Dungeons and Dragons, so
Understandable. So that's just it. You can find models in a lot of places. Uh, Google is your friend. Feel free to utilize it. So simple, Google search for 3D models, and you can find stuff. If you're looking for specifics, you can obviously put that in as a search term. But we're going to do that here. So let's take a look here. We want a gear. So something like this, or do we want to actually try and find something?
ooh, so many options.
There are, and
Let's do
you'll
go
find
up one.
you'll find a little bit of a delay sometimes. The website, I've always noticed, has been a little slow in loading, and this has actually been the fastest it's been for me in quite a while. But give it time, and if
Let's do the hourglass
the
one.
hourglass one, this one here. All right. So with this one, we are going to simply download the file, and these are usually prepared by other people. So this is a object file or an STL file in most cases.
Oh.
There we go.
Okay, well, fun then.
No, is there something you
So-
wanted to say about it? Good.
Yeah, so with the object and STL file, is there a real difference when you're uploading it into the software, or can it take both?
It should be able to take both. I haven't had any issues with either or. It's just two different file formats. But this here will show you a preview. This is your 3D model, essentially. It's a preview for you. You'll see down here usually if anyone's made it, 0 makes, how many files it is, and then usually any comments. And a lot of times if the model itself is something that requires tweaking, I've seen that the creators will add that in as a summary. So they'll say, what specifications they printed out, so their infill density, their layer height, that sort of thing. So you'll find a lot of that detail usually with it. Now, because it is all user created, sometimes you get nothing, and you got to play around with it. So we'll see what happens here. At least with the slicing, we're going to just assume some standard stuff. But at home with your own printer, or if you come in and use ours, we may have to play around with it, but we always will probably start with a standard. So let's go ahead and download the files here. Let's go ahead and take a look at that in the slicing software. So in order to unload it, you just open, go to wherever you stored that, and you'll have the images, but we're going to look for the files themselves. And as you can see here, if I go to properties, this is an STL file. So it's usually a pretty standard one. And we just say open, and it's just like opening a file in any other program. You find the file, you hit open. As long as the program that you're using can read that file, you'll be fine. So obj STL, usually okay. And now we have our object placed on the mat here, so we can actually utilize that. And this other movement here where I'm panning, this is a shift and right click. So this allows me to move my camera around a little bit more. So if I want to move it down or up, I use shift and right click to do that. Zoom in, zoom out, and then rotate. So with this on the screen here, I can actually click on it and I can make a few other adjustments. Now this is not going to be for heavy modification. If you wanted to do something like change the shape of that, we're not going to be sticking to the slicing software. We'd actually go into a CAD software, something that will allow us to edit and manipulate that object a little bit more, recreate the STL file, and then load it into this. This is more like I need to make a quick, simple size adjustment, maybe a rotation, maybe duplicate it or something like that, and then we'll make our adjustments over here for the print qualities in those different objects. So whenever we have it on the field here, we can do a few things. The first thing is position. So it usually centers it on the bed, right? And you use Cura at home?
Yes, that's
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
For one of my printers, yes.
All right. So that's right, because you also you have a resin printer.
I
So
do.
what do you use for that one specifically?
So that one I have, I can actually show you. Little itty bitty thing right here. So for that one, it's actually a photon resin printer. And it comes with its own software
Okay.
that you have to use. Unfortunately, I think you can use other softwares, but for the majority of it, they recommend sticking to even like customers who have bought it. They're like, just stick with the normal software. It's easier.
I'm sure you'll find that with a lot of manufacturers. Same with Lulzbot. You know, Cura is an open source thing, and this is just one flavor of it, right? So there's also Ultimate Cura. There's a variety of others. So the manufacturer will usually provide you with the software, unless they're really just like, hey, whatever. But a lot of times with these, Ultimaker versus Lulzbot, it's just machine settings and a few other changes to G-code. But, utilize what they recommend. Makes your life easier. Why not? So there you go.
It
And
really does.
it's free to get. It's not hard. So we'll just stick with that. So we're going to be utilizing Lulzbot in here. But we have our file placed. So it will start usually center the bed. If you're wanting to do some things like, okay, I want to only print up here, I'm going to place another object here, you can maneuver it around. So you have the ability to change things using your arrows here. So Z-axis, Y-axis, and X-axis.
So this is something I've never understood. When printing, why would you ever want to move it on the Z-axis?
I honestly don't know because I've never printed anything higher than the bed level. And in most cases, you're going to have to put it flat to the bed in some way or provide a support structure underneath that will allow that, right?
See, that's what I
So,
figured.
Yeah,
Kind of odd.
there wouldn't really be a reason to change a single object. I mean, I'd have to probably ask someone who's done that specifically. But every time I've printed, I've never had to change its Z-axis position. And when I try to do that, you'll notice it still drops it right down to the bed because,
Yep.
currently I don't have any
Makes
support
sense.
structures set, but let's see if we can just change that real quick. Yeah, nope, still going to go flat. So, yeah, but you can at least change your X and Y using these options here, and that might be good if you're trying to place multiple objects and you want to try and get them as close as possible, what have you. You simply select the object and you can change the settings there. You'll notice it's listed here in millimeters, and that's usually the standard that we're using. We're going to use a metric system. We can change this, but it's not that bad. We also have our scaling. So scaling is going to be something that's interesting because the piece itself starts off at this size, but I can actually scale it up or down using these options here. And this is a uniform scaling that's currently set, which means that whatever axis I scale will scale the rest of them in tandem. So right now everything's at 100%. If I wanted to bring it up to 200, they'll all jump to 200. And there we go. So with scaling, we can change the size itself for the object. Now, whenever you do so, you might see details change a little bit, but it's usually something that you can do to help change your object size on the fly. Will this work if you're trying to do something precise? Just make sure that you know what those measurements are, and then maybe you could adjust it that way. But if you need to change something like only the height, then you would turn off uniform scaling, and now you can adjust one of its axes here.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask about that.
So that's uniform versus ununiform there. In most cases, though, I'd say keep the object at uniform scaling because it's the way that you saw it is obviously what you like. If you really want to do some more adjustments to it, though, so if I wanted to change the shape of the teeth or something like that, once again, CAD software, you're going to have to start manipulating that object further. This is just for simple adjustments in here. There's also rotation. Now, rotation is going to come in handy whenever you're doing something like printing an object that may have a large gap in something. It's going to allow you to change its orientation on the print bed to hopefully allow you to get the best print possible. You're going to want a flat area on the print bed at all times, if you can. So something like this here, I am flat down at the bottom. It's going to adhere pretty well to the build plate, and I don't have to worry about it. But let's say the object I got was flipped for whatever reason. Well, you hit rotate, and once again you have your axis rotations here. And it's just a click and drag on these, and it allows you to rotate the object. And it's going to be in degrees. So
Rotation is also good, in my experience anyways. Rotation is also good if you have something that you're trying to print that has like an engraving on it or a name. So that way when it's printing upside down, basically, the name comes out clearer versus having a whole bunch of supports in that area.
right. So you, yeah, if you have anything with space,
Or detail.
detail, something like that. Like these little dots right here, this is fine because it's building up from the floor. You know, but if I flip this around, whenever you have a support structure or a structure like this with an opening like Alex was talking about here, you don't want to have to build supports in this. So finding the flattest object, the flattest part of that would help. So with this one being flat on the top, I then rotate that to be the bottom, and now it can build out that a lot better because that empty space is going to be built up as it goes layer by layer instead of having to do scaffolding bit by bit. So flattest part if possible, and rotate can help you get that. You can also, you know, rotate in other directions, maybe like this at an angle, and this might be useful for something like those 3D minis that Alex was talking about here. You have something that you want to print out, but it has a weird overhang. You might rotate that object so that instead of the overhang being straight out, maybe it's angled a little bit more so it's easier for the printer to handle. There's little tips and tricks that you can do. It really depends on the object itself, though. So if you have questions...
This is also, sorry,
Yeah.
This is also useful for like if you're a hobbyist and you like to do war terrains and reenactment sections. This would be a great way to build like trees or bushes and things, and rotating that object would probably be your best bet to get the most detail on one side or the other.
So there you go. There's little tips and tricks like that that you know, you just sort of run into as you're working with these object files. A lot of times you can ask the creator if it's an open source thing. You try and send them an email or something, leave a comment on their profile. But you'll find a lot of helpful tips usually with other people who've printed. So if you can, try and follow those. The other thing that you can do is you can mirror the object. So I can just flip its orientation if I really need to. Why? Well, if for whatever reason you want to make a mirrored copy, you can. One of the other things, though, is multiply object, and this is pretty great because, okay, I have one thing I want to do, but my build space allows for quite a bit more. What do I do? Well, you can multiply it. So from now, you just say the number of copies, and this is going to be the number of copies beyond your first, so you'll still have your first. So if I say 8 more, I should have 9 copies on this bed.
Make all the things.
There we go. And it will try and automatically space them so that they fit within your build area. So from here, if you'd like to, you could then maneuver their location. If you want to allow more space for it, you know, these are little tweaks that you could make from here. but by default it will try and find the best area for it so that they all fit. And if you can't fit them on there, just remove one. And to remove them, it's quite simple. It's a selection to manipulate sort of method here. So anytime I want to manipulate an object, I select the object I want to manipulate. And then from there, maneuvering it, scaling it, what have you. And delete is quite simply hit delete on your keyboard and it's gone. So I can get rid of them that way. Well, if my computer will respond quickly. You can also use some keyboard shortcuts like Control A that will allow you to highlight all. So there's a few things that you can do if you're used to keyboard shortcuts. Alright, but that is our importing the object, making quick changes. From there, the next thing that we're going to look at is going to be this side over here. This is our profile, essentially. So whenever we were talking about downloading profiles earlier, it was high speed, high quality, and standard for PLA. That is what these are. So by default, this software sets it up with a standard setting. This is your profile. It's standard profile. And that right here, so you'll see profile says standard, it also tells me my layer height. So this is at 0.25 millimeters for my layer height. And then from there, we have these simple settings, our infill, our supports, and our build plate adhesion. All that's pretty straightforward. Now with material, you can set the type of material. We have a bunch of Polylite PLA. That's what we're using specifically at our branch. So if you're using our machine, make sure that you use the Polymaker Polylite PLA. We don't do Polyflex, we don't do PETG, we don't do ABS. So these sorts of things we won't be using here.
Now, do you know of any locations that may do ABS, or is ABS kind of off the board for all HCPL maker spaces and locations?
So from what I've talked to, it's off the board.
Okay.
We won't be doing ABS, at least in any current iteration. Will that change in the future? I can't say. But I think due to the possibility of any off-gassing of noxious fumes or anything like that, and just ensuring that we have proper ventilation all the time, that can be hard depending on the branch that you're at, what facilities they have available. So it may be that, I don't know, in the future some of them can, but as a standard safety procedure, PLA, because of the material makeup that it is, it's safe. So we're going to use that. That's what I know so far. But we'll see what happens in the future. Who knows? I just, don't say that. Oh, he said no. I don't know.
At the moment, it's a no, but it could change.
Who knows? So with this, if you're doing a print with us, ensure it's Polylite PLA for our Lulzbot machine. And then for your details here, so you have high speed, high detail, and standard. And you'll notice these changes here. High detail, 0.15 millimeters, high speed, 0.35. So it's just increments of a tenth on each of these. But they do change things pretty drastically. So for example here, when I look at this one, I can see down here in the bottom, after it slices, it gives me a detailed output here. Okay, so this is about how long it'll take, 28 minutes, about how much weight or how much material you'll use. So it's going to be 4 grams, is about 0.62 meters of the spool that is going to be used. And that's with the current settings. Now if I change one of these quick detail things, so now I'm going to high detail, it's going to slice for me. Notice the change in time. The weight, same. The overall use, it's changed by like 100th. It was like 0.62, now it's 0.6. But my time has increased a little bit over double, right? So it was 28 minutes, now it's an hour. And that's just because the detail required, that layer height, means more time for each layer, because it's going to be doing a whole bunch of smaller ones. And if we go high speed, so if a standard was 28 minutes, let's see what we got here, maybe 17 minutes, same weight though. So we're not changing anything that will adjust its overall mass. The only thing we're changing is the height of each layer, and then the speed at which that will print. So that is these quick settings. But if you wanted to change it further, you go to customize. So you go to custom here, and this is where you can start getting into the nitty-gritty. Now, I think we should probably talk a little bit more about what's on recommended first, just so we get a little understanding of things like infill and support generation. But then we can talk about custom. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
So with
I think the custom's going to be a little bit lengthy, so.
so we'll keep it short and we'll just talk about the general aspects because we don't want this to be too long. With infill, this is your infill density. So how much material is being used between each wall that's generated. This is usually done in some sort of cross pattern or honeycomb pattern or something like that. But it's going to be material that provides structural support. And it's almost like I'm trying to think of another real world example, a honeycomb structure within like bumpers and stuff like that. So it's that crush support, if it falls or
So
something.
I have a question about that.
Mhm.
I've always kind of wondered why you would different infill. Like for me, I usually default to the not the honeycomb, but the grid infill. So I guess, do you know the difference between why you would use a honeycomb over a grid pattern or
The only thing I could truly think of is the shape will maybe adjust your overall support integrity, like if the object had to support weight or something like that. Because like different shapes can affect how much weight they can support with inside. So that is what I would assume. Unfortunately, I don't know specifics on that because, in all honesty, for the things I'm building, I don't require that. Could we find out?
yeah.
Absolutely. So if we
Google.
yes, we could definitely find out if we need that specifically. Do you have any background? Because you always default to what is yours? You said it was a.
So I usually do grid if I'm doing something large. However, I'll do a thicker shell, which I think we'll talk about here a little bit later. I'll do a thicker shell with basically less infill with the grid pattern, and then for the most part, and when I'm printing my miniatures, it's just 100% infill.
Mm.
So
Yeah, there's a variety of shapes, and depending on what you're trying to build, I believe those shapes will help create more structural integrity or anything that you're going to want to work with. I would say default is fine if you're just doing something for fun, but if you actually need it to be something that's more mechanically sound, we can take a look at which one might be best for the object that you're working with. And I think if I'm not mistaken, it's entirely dependent on what that object's purpose is. If it's a figurine sitting on a desk, like you said, increased walls, you don't have to worry about it too much. But if it's something that's holding up a part, then yeah, you might need more information on what your infill would be. But yeah, there's a variety of different types, and you can change those in your custom settings. But overall, this is just the density of the infill. So this isn't changing its shape right here. This is going to be how much infill we have in the object itself. So with 20% infill, and this is usually a standard that I see 10 to 20, depends on the object that you're printing, but in most cases I see it at 10 to 20. It's going to be 10% of that object's mass on the inside is these concentric lines. The higher you go, the more mass you add. So if I do this here, after slicing at 90%, I increase to 5 grams. And this will also adjust your time as well. 100%, 5 grams, 19 minutes. Go down to 20%, 17 minutes, 4 grams. So it adjusts things for you. It will change those aspects. If I go to standard here, it shouldn't change the weight or anything too massively.
So,
Yeah, 5
what
grams.
objects would you recommend doing anything less than 100% on?
I actually have one. And this one was something that came through with one of the things from the TXRX Labs build. This is one of those face mask headbands.
Okay.
You don't really need infill for this. It's too thin. You can just do bigger walls. So with something like this, we wouldn't need an infill setting. And that's just because it's simple bands. Something like that there, it's too narrow for too much infill. So just thick walls would get you done there where you have like 0 infill.
Okay.
All right.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah. So it's like, small detailed things like that where, heavy filigree things, you don't need an infill for that because it's just concentric lines. That would be your walls. You just make your walls a little bit larger, you get more structural support, and you can bring your infill down. But it depends on the object. So if you're doing a solid object, though, your infill you'll change there. With generate support, though, this is going to be support structures for parts that have an overhang, and I believe the default here is 45 degrees.
45, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a 45-degree angle. So, 90 degrees here, 45 here, 180 there. So anything further than 45 will start to generate the support structure. And this is quite simply, click it on. That's all I got to do. Now this will generate a standard support. You can do custom support patterns. You can also try and place your own custom supports using one of the options over here. The object that I have doesn't really need it, so we're good with it. But if you wanted to try and adjust these things, you do have the option to do your own custom supports. But in most cases, a standard support I've found works pretty well. Now you've worked with minis and stuff, so because minis I usually find are the ones that need a lot of support.
Yeah, they need a lot of support, and they need supports that do not attach to the object, like, super strongly. So I found, like, with a lot of Kira supports, especially with how they do the pattern for their supports, it tends to really stick to the object. And I wonder if I have an example I can show you.
Where you just broke it off and had to file it down because it was still hanging there?
Yeah, so actually, I think I've done pretty well at hiding most of it, but for this, it's going to be really hard to see in this video. So I 3D printed this egg. Don't ask why.
Khaleesi. Khaleesi. You have dragons.
And as you can see, like right down here, there's still like a lot of, you can still see where the supports were attached.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I couldn't even file it down enough for it to like really look any better, I guess. So that's one of the examples. So I found I usually have to go into something like Mesh Mixer and add their supports manually through there and then re-upload it into Kira.
So there you go. Something that you might want to try and take advantage of if you're trying to do a miniature or something like that. Get Mesh Mixer, import into there, apply supports, then export. Sorry.
That was a really lengthy response. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, I heard something. That's all. Oh, it's something over on my end. That's all. Sorry, jumping into weird stuff there. But yeah, so you would change those supports, third-party programs, something like that. Now, Mesh Mixer, website for it? Just meshmixer.com?
Yeah,
okay.
Like literally, if you just Google Mesh Mixer, it'll be the first thing that pops up. It's a lot of it's a free software, so anybody can use it, and that's why a lot of people will default to it.
Mm-hmm.
So
there you go. So that's good. That's a good tip though, because the supports that you can generate into here, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that here after the last part. They come in a variety of styles, so you can maybe adjust them a little bit, but some of them you'll want to do manually. So with the last thing though here, so we have build plate adhesion. This is all about different things that are done to help with the object adherence to the build plate itself. Now, there are things that we can do to the build plate manually. Do you use tape at all? You're using glass bed, so what do you use to help with adhesion? Is it just straight, or do you actually apply other things?
So when I was having issues with it sticking with the normal bed that it came with, I would use painter's tape over top, and that would help for a time being. And then another tip that I learned from forums and things like that was to take like regular stick glue and apply just like a little bit. You don't need to like dump it all on there. It's
Right.
just like a small layer of it will typically do the trick too.
Yes.
So,
There's also hairspray adhesive. So you could use. I've heard that hairspray works okay, but painter's tape, sticky glue, and the glue stick. Those are both things that we also have at the branch as well. So I've had to do it on our monoprice specifically with the PEIE or the PIE glass bed. We don't have too many adhesion problems. We also have the ability to. It's a heated bed, so adhesion can be helped with a little bit there as well. Some printer models don't have heated beds, but I think most of them do now. Like I haven't seen
yeah.
a $300 one that
Even
doesn't.
mine has it.
Yes.
And mine was like 200.
Yeah. So
So,
even on the low end, they pretty much have them now. But if like you're building one from scratch or something, you might need to think about, oh, do I need the heating element? Okay, handle that. But we have build plate adhesion, so skirt, brim, raft, or none. None is quite literally it just starts the object, bam, and it's down. Skirt, which is usually the default that this is done, it'll do an outline, and it just sort of helps clear the nozzle with the feed a little bit, and then hopefully you're good to go when it starts actually printing the object. So it'll do an outline of the object and then print inside of it. With brim, this is going to be, it's like concentric rings around it is what I want to call it. It's almost spiral-like pattern is every time I've seen it. So it will start building into the base, and then once it's done, whenever you pull it off, it's like this little flimsy, massive pigtail from the bottom. That's every time I've seen it, and sometimes I've had issues with trimming that, so I have to get like calipers or something and cut it, but it's okay. And then raft is you're building a raft that this thing sits upon, so it's a few layers, maybe 3.
so what would you normally recommend?
Entirely depends on the object. If it's a flat object, I would say you could probably go with a skirt or a brim, or on the Lulzbot, if it's flat base, you could probably get away with none. But I would at least say skirt. And then raft if you have like a weird object that needs something to sit upon. It also can help with adhesion if you're just finding that these things aren't working. Putting the raft down might help because it adheres to itself a little bit better. So just having it do layers, even if they're messy layers, it's a raft. You don't really care. So as long as it gets that raft started, and then it can print on top of that, you'll be okay. So it doesn't matter if the raft looks pristine or anything; it can be messy as heck, and and then as long as you get the adhesion, you're good. So it really depends on what you're working with. But if it's a flat object, you can use a skirt and probably be fine. Do we need anything else on top of that, like any of the other adhesive methods that might help? Depends on which printer you're using. If you're using the Cura, the Lulzbot, you should be okay because that's our newer printer. It hasn't seen as much use. Build plate's still really good condition. It's heated PIE, so it shouldn't have any issues with it. I don't think it's going to be a problem with that one. If you're using our monoprice or a smaller one, though, yeah, we may bring out a glue stick or something for it. So
Bring out the heavy duty stuff.
just painter's tape all over, glue stick, hairspray. Just no. It's a tack bed on that one. It's literally just an adhesive strip that gets applied already. So it's supposed to be similar to painter's tape, but it's not the best material. So I've actually done glue stick on the last few prints I've done with it. So that's all. But yeah, so that sort of covers our general. So after that, you would literally slice it, and then with this one, it's going to be connected to the printer anyway, so you can actually go into monitor mode here. And as long as you're connected with that USB, we'll connect the printer and it'll start reading the file information. It'll just print it just like a normal printer at home, like if you're doing a 2D object. But if you're doing it on the monoprice, we do have to export it. So we'd save the file, we'd put it on an SD card, and then export it that way. But if we wanted to do a little bit more, so if you want to try and mess around with a few of the settings yourself, or maybe the creator of the object that you've downloaded or that you're working with has said, hey, do these specific things, and you want to do those because this doesn't provide it for you, then hit that custom button. And this is where you can change those things a little bit further. So quality is all about your layer height. So you have your initial layer height, your line width, these sorts of things, your wall line width, outer wall line width. All these different things can be changed to your liking, okay? So if I wanted to change this to 0.1 instead of 0.15, I can do that. If I wanted to go to 0.4 for whatever reason, I could do that. So you have full control in this section here. And this is all going to be about your layers. With shell thickness, this is going to be your walls. Now, you were talking about increasing your wall thickness here. You'll notice that
Yeah.
we're in recommended. We don't have that option. So if you need to increase your walls, go into here and go to shell. And then your wall thickness, so how thick each line is, and then how many walls are going to be printed with the object itself. With that sort of weird headband thing that I had, pump it to 6 or something like that, because
you have no infill
Yeah.
for you either.
So
I
you're
know, again, like this egg that I printed out. So if you want an example of something where you don't want infill, but you want a sturdy object, this egg is pretty solid. It has, I think I put it at like 8 walls or something, but it has absolutely no infill inside of it. So, I mean, it's a sturdy object and you don't have to worry about all the added stuff on the inside.
There you go. So you can change these settings within here. Your infill, so once again, our density, you have control of that. But you also have your pattern. So this is where that can change. Zigzag, cross, triangles, trihex, that sort of thing. So you can change those within here. And like I said, we're not going to spend time in all these different things. We're just going to show you these specifically. Material selection. This one's going to be something that you might want to look into depending on the material that you're using, especially if you're doing it at home. Do you have a specific manufacturer that you get your PLA from, or your spool from?
So, yes and no. I have 2 different PLAs. I have one from 3D Solution Tech, and then I have one from Hatchbox.
Okay.
I am highly disappointed in the one from Hatchbox. It's a white PLA, and my printer does not seem to like it very much. I always have issues when I try to print with it.
Okay. So yeah, there's different manufacturers. Polylite is one that makes the 0.285 millimeter that we use with this Lulzbot because it requires a thicker piece of PLA, but most of your other PLAs, especially for at-home printers, a single nozzle, 1.75 or
Yep,
1.75.
1.75.
Yeah.
I remembered to commit that number to heart.
So if you're purchasing at home, you'll have to keep that stuff in mind. But a lot of times the manufacturer will provide or hopefully tell you the information like, here's your print temperature range, for this material that we're using. In PLA, usually I see like 190 to 220, 230 on the high end or something like that. Does your printer have a default that you use?
For the print bed?
No, for your print temperature. So for your nozzle temp.
Print temperature. Oh, for the nozzle. Sorry, I don't know where I got the print bed from. So for the nozzle, I believe it's 225.
225 is what you use. So, and then
I think so.
a lot of times what I have is like 195 to 205, depending on the color for the mono price, and like 215 for this one. So that can change depending on the material and the machine. So you'll find that stuff, and you can start with one, see how the print goes. If you're seeing issues, track that issue, research it if you need to, make a change.
It's a lot of trial and error, especially if you're doing it at home and you don't really have, I guess, an expert like Loyd here to help you through it. I know for me, I spent a lot of hours of frustration working with my 3D printer, and it's not to take away the reward, but it was very much, I don't know how to describe it. It's very much you're kind of on your own when you learn this stuff, and it can be really frustrating sometimes.
That's true. I mean, that's also sort of like I feel it's a lot of the maker philosophy is like you're in there to make it. That's not to say that you can't find stuff on it, but it's like it's self-driven. You're trying to do this, so you have that drive to do it. So you're going to go find the information on it.
Very much.
But we'll try and provide information for you guys too, as people who are working with these tools and materials, in our day jobs and at home. But so you have the ability to change your temperature here, and a lot of times it's going to be your nozzle temperature at the top. And then you also have your build plate temperature. So this is the other temp that you can adjust, and this is going to be for helping with adhesion to the bed. So these different things can be changed here, and it's as well as things like flow rate, diameter. That's going to be set by your nozzle. So whatever your print head is using, you'll stick to the diameter that you need depending on that nozzle, and that's going to usually be, 1.75 or 2.85 depending on what you're using. 1.75 is pretty much what I see a lot of different ones are moving to. So all those settings are going to be within here. And then speed, quite literally how fast it's going to start printing. Yeah. And you can find that you have issues sometimes with a faster speed, so this is going to be trial and error again. Cooling, you probably want to just leave that on. It helps with adhesion a little bit.
Don't touch that.
But down here is your support. So generate support. When I do so, take a look at my options here. It just opened them up for me. Support placement everywhere. This means it's going to be on the object as well. This can be helpful, but also a hindrance. So like if I have an object that goes like this, it'll generate a support from one piece to the next, but then I have to break that out and maybe file that down. And then you have your support pattern. So for this one, it's not so much about, it's a little bit about structural integrity, but it's not the same as if I was doing infill. This is more of I'm creating a support and it's going to have this zigzag pattern or this crosshatch pattern or something like that will allow things to build on it better. Grid usually works pretty decently. And then your support density, you can change that option in here as well. And then beyond that, you have a few other things, your max fishes, some
Quick
special
question.
modes.
What exactly is support density?
So that should be how much material is being used for the support. All right, so is it going to be a stronger support structure, or is it going to be something that hopefully will break away easier? All right, you'll see here, it even says there on there, a higher value results in better overhangs, but supports are harder to move. So if you wanted to try and make something that was easier to remove, bring that down. But that could also be, I've seen this in some cases, like the flow just doesn't work that well and you have a very low infill density or something, and so it's just extruding little lines and they don't work that well in the end, as a support itself. Yeah. So trial and error, that's going to be a lot of it. You can't just be like, oh yeah, you need to do that, and you'll get the best print ever. There's things that we can do to try and ensure that, but a lot of it's like, we're going to mess around and find out, And then your experimental features down here, don't need to worry about those.
Now, if you really want to risk it,
feel free, but also take a look in the forums, see if you actually need some of those. It really depends. So custom settings, way more options. But if you're just trying to do something quick as a first-time print, and you just need like infill 25, and you don't really care about the speed because you're leaving and going to pick up the print later anyway, set it to one of these, your standard or your high detail, something like that, and you'll be fine.
It's pretty much you pick what you want to sacrifice. You either want to sacrifice the time or you want to sacrifice the detail type of situation was what I learned when I first started printing.
Absolutely. And, if you've taken our orientation, we talked a little bit about that as well whenever we get into things like layer height. But this is a actual viewing of how you change those aspects. So this is something that you can take a look at and reference. There's also plenty of tutorials and videos on this stuff online. We're not your only source. We're just providing you a source of information from the library itself. But feel free to access those things. YouTube, there's plenty of different content creators out there who have instructionals or information about different printers, different softwares. We're focusing on the things that we're going to be using here at our branch. So,
yeah.
Well, that's
awesome.
That's a pretty detailed thing, don't you think? Is there anything else that you would add that you would want to tell people about using slicing software?
I mean, really, you just gotta jump into it. The whole reason why we kind of decided to make this video is because while we do have the orientation for our 3D printing, I know there's a lot of people out there that will probably go to the orientation, but then go home and not really understand how to do any of the stuff they need to do to bring the print file to us. I mean, for me, 3D printing, like I said before, and I will keep saying it, just as Loyd has, it is a lot of trial and error. So
very much so. And that's not to say that you can't bring it to us and we'll try and help you with it. We can
Yeah.
do that. If you schedule the time to use the machine, we'll make sure to set aside some time to try and help if you need it. But if you come in and you don't even have a file, you don't know what you want to print, that's a waste of both your time and our time. So first of all, think about what you want to print. So Thingiverse, great place to look. If you
My
want
favorite.
if you want to create a file and you don't have any CAD experience, Tinkercad is actually a really great learning resource because they show you how to use their tools, and it's web-based, so you don't need software. You just log in, and it's a Autodesk product, so it's pretty good. Great for young learners too. I'm not even a young learner, but I still play around with it because it's just like, hey, this is easy, and I need easy. So, um,
Hey, if it works, it works.
if it works, it works. But beyond that, if you want to try and slice it, you can do so, and then the file's pre-prepped, and then you just bring it in, set it, and go. And after a few layers are down, we make sure that it's adhering okay. You can head out early, But if you want to actually, if you need some help with it, even after this, you're like, I just,
Can't seem to get it right.
That's
Bring
what
it on in, and we'll help you.
we here on staff are here to help for. So yeah, we will do that. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. I think this has been pretty decent. Jump in on our tech talk, which will be coming up soon. Yeah, because what's the next one that
Next week.
next week?
Yeah, so this video should be going up Friday at 2 or something like that. And so our live tech talk will be same time, same place.
Yeah. So thank you for stopping in. I'm Loyd.
I'm Lexi.
Have a good one.